I would like also to thank the organizers, the ideas, and also the Law and Society Trust, as well as the Open Society Fund for organizing this event and also for inviting me here. This is my first time to come to Sri Lanka. My job used to be in the United Nations, so I've traveled quite extensively. I must say that the few days I'm here, I fall in love in this country. I think Sri Lanka has a lot to offer. I'm very pleased to see you all here today because today is the weekend and you still want to listen to what is going on with the debt restructuring the country. I think it is very important. When I landed here from the airport, the hotel sent a chauffeur to pick me up, and the chauffeur was very happy to tell me that we are okay now, we have IMF with us. I think this is the wrong kind of concept and understanding. This is just the start. You have a lot suffering to go, and the citizens, ordinary people, should know where you stand, what you are going to do, and what kind of role you can play, because the citizens, the population of the country, do have a role to play. For instance, for the IMF bridge financing, it will cover 4 years, and it will have a 6-month review 8 times. So each time, if the IMF would say that you have not done your job, you will not have your money to be paid. And the money is not a huge amount. It's 330 million each time. So the IMF has kept you on short leash. However, if the IMF is going to say, I'm not going to pay you because you have not fulfilled your obligations, and then internationally, you would have very bad opinion from the investors. You certainly won't have access to borrow from the international market. So you have to be vigilant and you have to play a role in the entire process. Now, where we stand with the IMF restructuring, the IMF's role, we know that your government announced default in April last year, and very quickly in May, the government employed the legal and finance advisors to advise on how to do this restructuring job. Of course, this will cost the government. And then in September last year, the IMF has reached the staff level agreement. However, your government immediately started to implement the IMF program. That's something quite unusual because you implement it very fast. And then the government reached out to bilateral creditors, which constitute about 14% of the total debt. Not a huge amount. But you need to get the assurances from these bilateral creditors in order for the IMF to agree to have a program and also release bridging finance. So the government got that. And then just a couple of days ago, you got the first installment of money. But that's just the start of the implementation of the program. You still have a lot to do because the private investors covers a huge amount and you haven't reached there yet. Chandra just now mentioned how come Sri Lanka has landed in the current position. We know you are deeply in debt, $80 billion in total, and half of it is domestic. And multilateral debt is about 14%. There are push factors as Chandra explained very clearly and very well to you, because there is a slush of liquidity floating around the world. And in the advanced countries, the interest rate was negative or very low. So the investors want to gain some money. So they are very eager, they have been very eager to lend money to the developing countries at about 6 or 7 or 8%. So it depends on the yield. But they are earning good money. If they park the money in their own country, they don't earn anything. If they lend money to Sri Lanka, they do earn this 7 to 8%. So it's to their benefit. So this is the push factor for lending, for many countries, many developing countries to fall into debt distress. Currently, we've done a recent study and we've counted, and there are about 68 developing countries either in debt distress or high risk of debt distress, which means quite a number of countries would follow suit, follow Sri Lanka to declare default. However, there is also the pull factor for Sri Lanka. Because for Sri Lanka, for many years, for decades, you've been suffering from fiscal deficit and also balance of payment deficit. So the government did not have enough money to cover this. However, the government would like to really muddle through, so the government started to borrow massively. So you floated the first bond in 2007, $100 million, not huge, at 7%, is reasonable. And then 2 years after, you floated another, the second bond, about the same size, about the same percentage of interest rate. And then this started, this push factor, and also your problems are getting worse, and you have less money. I mean, the government had less money to cover the expenditure. So between 2015 and 2019, the government floated 1 year a bond each year, and 2019 2 bonds. But the size is getting much bigger. It's 2.5 billion almost each time. So altogether, you accumulated 12 billion US dollars. So you are having a kind of binge, borrowing binge. However, you have to service the debt. And there are external shocks mentioned by Chandra and also Charles. And I don't need to mention that. All of you know the kind of external factors, COVID, Ukraine, and also the increase of interest rates in the United States and other advanced countries. So there are various kinds of external shocks in the world. So the rollover, or in normal terms, if you have a mortgage, you have to pay principal and interest. So for your country, each year you have to pay to service debt about 4 billion US dollars. Now we come to the IMF funding, bridge funding. It is 2.9 billion US dollars. The arrears you accumulated in 1 year, starting from you declaring default, was more than the IMF financing. And also, it was mentioned about the interest rates to be charged. Normally, the IMF would give low-income countries concessional interest rate or even grants. However, Sri Lanka now is a middle-income country, so you have to pay higher interest rate because you've lost this status of access to concessional financing, and you lost the kind of technical support to the low-income countries. So the government has not adjusted to that. So what are the challenges you are facing with this debt restructuring? The Sri Lanka government has gone into IMF in the past 16 times. However, it was not for debt restructuring. This 17th time for you to enter into an IMF program is for debt restructuring. It's the first time. So the governments, experts, academia, they don't really know how to handle debt restructuring. So first of all, you have to learn what to do and how to do it. For instance, for Argentina, they can do it well because they had quite a number of defaults. So that's one challenge. Another challenge is it is happening at a very bad time. You've heard about this bank collapse, that bank collapsed in the US and in Switzerland, where I come from. So now you have a lot of financial market volatility in the world. Interest rate is high, and domestically, you have no money. Your foreign exchange reserve depleted, and your tourism, which is a major sector in your economy, has just started to pick up. So in the past, the money you borrowed, much of it have not been invested in the industrial or growth promotion sectors to create money, to create revenue and foreign exchange for you to service debt. So you are actually, the country has been living beyond its means. So that's the difficulty. If you have a solid, in economic terms, we said if you have solid economic fundamentals, of course, first of all, you won't fall into debt crisis. And secondly, if you have a better foundation, you can better handle debt restructuring, but you don't have that. And another factor is that you have a lot of private sector borrowing. I mentioned about the bonds that you floated. You are dealing with millions of private creditors. And for the private creditors, their first instinct is, I won't accept any haircut. We call haircut, which means that you reduce, if you have a mortgage, you reduce the principals. That's the haircut. And they don't want to have maturity extension or coupon adjustment, that is interest rate, they adjust. So they don't want to have it. I invest, I want to have money, I want to earn money. However, in the current world, we are living in a non-system world for debt restructuring. There is no mechanism that can govern this kind of debt restructuring. So the private sectors can say, I don't want to participate. The principle is, when it comes to debt restructuring, it's very clear. The cornerstone is all creditors should be treated equal. If the official bilateral creditors accept certain terms, the private creditors must accept similar comparable terms, but they won't do it. Not only they don't like to do it, there are no incentives or kind of punitive measures to force them to do it. And the worst thing is, these creditors, big ones, not individuals in the pension funds, the big financial institutions like hedge funds, they can bring your government to court. And currently, there is one bank which is suing Sri Lanka and in the New York federal court, already brought your government to the court to say you must pay my bond in 100% term. So now the government is hiring people to fight this case, and this is going to be costly. So, of course, there are various kinds of measures the governments can use for domestic creditors. So if you have the major countries, they use their own political will to force, probably you can place some influence on this, but it's very difficult. So this private sector participation, you haven't started yet, not even the little bit. Yeah. So this is going to be a major challenge. Another thing is that there will be austerity. That is, people will suffer. So the chauffeur told me on the road, he's very talkative. He said, the price of the bread, comparing before COVID to now, increased 4 times, which means that daily consumption products or items for ordinary people, the inflation rate is much higher than the average inflation rate, 70% or whatever. It changes all the time. So with this IMF program, they ask you to change, just like it was mentioned, to say that the primary balance has to be changed from deficit in 2 years' time. By 2025, it has to be in surplus. How do you do that? You need either have sufficient liquidity to flow in to support you, which you don't have, because you are already a middle income country. You are treated like that, and you are not given good terms for this financing from the IMF. And domestically, the recovery of various industries will not be that fast. So, what else to do? You have to cut expenditure, cut wages, and the IMF said that you should not reduce the social spending. But how can you do that? How can you do it? So it is something to say, in principle, people should not really suffer, but actually I'm requesting you to do it. So ordinary people have to prepare for hard life, for hard days, and it will not be just 1 year. Very likely it will be several years or even longer. Latin American countries, when they went through that restructuring, they talked about the lost decade. So you have to prepare for hard life for several years to 10 years or longer. So in between, you have to make your voice heard about your suffering, about what you wish the government to do, what you expect the international community to do. So by getting your voice heard, you might change the policies to a certain extent. There are also other options in addition to people. You could think about innovative financing. For instance, now the World Bank has reversed your status back to the low-income countries. So try to get concessional financing. And the other countries, small island countries like Barbados, they have used such instruments like debt for climate change, swap or transfer or whatever you call that, which means they make up a climate change adaptation plan, environmental protection plan, in return for some money from IMF or other regional banks you could do the same because you have blue economy, you have the ocean, Indian Ocean, you also have the green economy. And you can also have nature to debt swap. And also you have a lot of diaspora living abroad. You can think about, it takes time. It will not happen tomorrow. For the preparation for a diaspora bond, it will take quite some time to prepare. You have to have road shows, to do a lot of things. You can think about that. And also think about how to encourage remittances, which is about 8.8 or higher percentage of your GDP. So try to simplify the process, try to raise the awareness of your diaspora and ask them to remit more money, and then turn this money into investment and try to have a virtuous circle. So money put in productive things and getting more money. So you have to think all kinds of innovative ways to bring more money and to bring more investment. So I wish you all good luck, and also try our best to influence the policy decision process, and also try to get your voice heard domestically and also internationally. Thank you very much.